Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Conversations in Pop Culture, where I have with me Mike Tiener, who is the creator and writer behind Black Jackets. So, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Oh man, I am stoked to be doing this. Just read Black Jackets issue one. Think it's ultra fascinating. But a lot of people are probably hearing about this comic for the first time, and so I kind of want to start everybody off in the same premise. So, what is the story on a very basic level of Black Jackets, and just to give an idea for everybody who's listening?
Sure. So it's a limited series. It's going to be 6 issues. It's about these kids who are stepping in and filling in for their parents who went missing. Well, their parents are monster hunters. They belong to this fraternal organization that's existed since the early 1900s, and these kids kind of got thrust into the role because no one else could fulfill the role. So now they're working together as a unit to try to, not only understand their responsibility to each other as a group, but um, uh, basically lean on each other emotionally because they are the only family, they're the only support that each of them have. So it's more about their relationship as a unit, and secondary to that is the fact that they're monster hunters.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff going on. I'm going to break it down in 1 second, but I do want to ask you, how did you even come up with this idea? Because there is a lot of moving parts. There's the monster hunting part, there's the missing parents part, there's them as a team, and then there's also sort of a horror element to it to some degree. So, how did that idea come together?
That's it's really hard for me to go back and think about that now because I'm not exactly sure like where the first thought took place. I think the name was the first thing. I think I was in my car and I thought of the title Black Jackets. I was like, okay, that sounds cool. Maybe it'll be a team. Blah blah blah. I just kind of a very arbitrary way to start the whole thing, but I think I always wanted to write a book that was about a group dynamic. And I grew up loving a lot of movies and TV shows, like Freaks and Geeks. I loved. Goonies was one of those movies I watched as a kid that I absolutely fell in love with. In recent years, Stranger Things I think is a great example of kids that are on adventures or they're experiencing a coming of age kind of format to the story. And I always wanted to write a book like that, and then just coincidentally I kind of implemented the supernatural element second to that. So it started off with just kids being kids was the idea, and then it kind of evolved into the more of the supernatural elements and things of that nature.
And to talk about some of that, because I think you've built a very interesting world with
Thanks.
this, and I think there's a lot of stuff, and I think you could clearly go beyond 6 issues very easily. And
Yeah.
one of the things that this book does that I appreciate, because I like books that kind of give us a little bit of back history going into it, is we get the first 2, 3 pages of who the Black Jackets are, how they formulated, the different divisions. We got the engineers, we got the alchemists, we got sorcery, and we also got demiology. And
Yeah.
so we have all that stuff, and we get a whole lot of information surrounding those different units, divisions, studies, disciplines, whatever word is supposed to fit there. I'm not exactly sure. But what was that like, even writing that and telling that side of the story? Because it does provide context. And while in the first issue, not necessarily we get that, I have a feeling that in the second and third issue, we're going to dive more into what that is exactly.
Yeah. So the disciplines, that was a lot of fun to sit down and come up with that. Uh, and it is a pretty important element of the story of I guess the like the world building. I think what I wanted people to have the information, but I didn't want that to be the focal point of what was going on because I like again the kids, it's their dynamic that I really want you to care about. I want you to care more about how they evolve and how they grow together. But I did know that I wanted you to know what discipline they chose and why they chose it, or start to pick apart aspects of their personality and see how that connects to the discipline that they chose. So the intent is for that to be something that exists in the world. In the story, they'll talk about it. There is hints of the fact that, of the 5 main characters, none of them are sorcerers. None of them chose that path. And so I do want to explore the disciplines and use the fact that none of them are sorcerers as a really integral part to developing them and also building the world without having to shoehorn all the information about the disciplines into the book and have a lot of unnecessary exposition. The idea is just to have it just slowly bleed in, just enough to where you're curious. And if you want to read more, then maybe I'll have a compendium or something like that where it'll really give you all the details.
And in many ways, this is cleaner because I've seen indie books. I'm sure you have as well. I've seen DC Comics sometimes does it. Marvel does it a lot more than I want them to do it. And they mess things up and they provide too much into something, and then it gets all messy and you get confused. And so I like that very much, where it's a cleaner, more linear process where, okay, we have the information, how does this fit into it? And it's right at the front of the book, which is also very helpful versus at the back of the book. Mm-hmm. And so I'm assuming that was intentional in building this out.
Yeah, it was. Absolutely. Because the idea is if you're interested enough to know about that, you'll read it. If not, you'll flip ahead and just get to the panel work, right? And you'll start reading the book that way. And then you're going to start having questions, and that will make you flip back to the front of the book again and say, I might read this now. I'm curious now. So it's there so that it's there, and it is good to know all this before you start the book. But if you just want to get into the action, that's what the book does, right? Very early on, it's setting the tone right away, right? Just they're right in the middle of a hunt, and you're paying more attention to how these kids are talking to each other than anything.
And I want to get to that in one more second, because one of the things about this book that I also like, and I kind of have an idea of why it's done this way, but this book is done in black and white versus in color. And good black and white can be amazing. I forget what Marvel book it is that there's a black and white version and there's a colored version of it. I think it's one of those X-Men books, and the difference in that entire book and series between the color and not color is night and day, where the black and white is just beautifully done. And also this book does have that horror element to it, and also black and white is cheaper to produce. And so I'm assuming there's a mixture of all of that, of why this is done in black and white versus in color.
Yeah, there is. Because it was never my intention to work on a black and white book, because honestly, there aren't a lot of black and white books that I've read that I've liked, But I can go back and think of a few now, but it wasn't my intention. The artist that I worked with on the book, Francesco Tomaselli, that does Black Jackets, he had such a unique art style that when he came up with the character designs and he sent them to me, I was floored at just the unique style. And then he started asking me about color references for the characters. I was like, I don't know if we need color for these. For black and white, there is a lot of texture, a lot of color, and a lot of depth to where it doesn't feel like you're reading a black and white book. At least I don't think that way sometimes when I look at it. It feels like it's in color just because of the depth that he puts into details and shading and contour. So he's kind of the reason we settled on black and white, is just because of how great of a job he did. And it was cheap. So that helped. So...
And I think it does add, though, to the entire overall theme of the book, where there is this mystery element, there is this horror element. They're going on a hunt to some degree, and they're a unit that hunts down monsters, for lack of a better word, and that would be great in color. But the fact that it's in black and white adds that dynamic, where the first thing I noticed when I read it was in black and white. But it didn't feel like a traditional black and white. It felt more like, we're doing something sort of in the shadows. And they're sort of in a shadowy organization, this entire group, for lack of a better word, or fraternity. And so that also I felt added a lot to it.
Yeah, I agree with you. Thank you. That's a good observation on it. It's definitely I think it plays up the horror theme really well. And it's subtle horror. Like I mean, there's gore in it, and there's demons and all kinds of the evil stuff you expect to see in a horror film. It's all in there, but there's all that the comedy and the action pacing of it. A lot of times, kind of helps offset that. I think so. The byproduct of the effect of the black and white, I think that just worked out in our favor. I don't know if it was intentional to begin with. I just love the style, and it just seemed to complement the writing pretty well, I guess. And the end result, we were pretty pleased with it. He tried coloring pages. He colored 3 or 4 pages and tried to pitch it to me that way. I guess so that he could make some more money. So I had to pay for the colors too. But we both, after he did them and we looked at the book in its entirety in black and white, I think we were both pleased with just keeping it in that scheme.
And now we're done talking about the technical side, because I want to get into the story of all of this and the things that stand out in it. And I think one of the big takeaways is teamwork, because we do see that teamwork dynamic. We see them coming together as a unit. They clearly have a leader. Evan is their leader in many ways. I think he's an engineer type, which makes sense. And so, what is this like? Really developing all the characters: Jack, Elise, Lynn, Evan, Asa, and all those. I think I said Asa's name, or is it?
You got it right. Yep, you got it right. A lot of people say it wrong, but you got it right.
And so, what was it really like developing this team and building out this team and really getting their coordination down? Because they do seem like a team, but they also seem like they're still learning some of their powers at the same time. And it's a nice balance.
Thanks. This is my first time doing a group book, like I said before, and I did not design them visually until I got with Francesco. I had had some concept art of characters before, but we changed them. We removed some characters, condensed it. So he was very much part of the visual design of them. Personality-wise, it just took a lot of, looking at my own friendships, I guess, growing up, and thinking about my friends and how we all bounced off each other from a personality perspective, and what it took to make a group work. And so the personalities just kind of evolved from that alone. Just figuring out, hey, do we need someone in the group that is more of a father figure, or the more mature leader of the group? Do we need someone like that? Absolutely. You have to have someone like that in a group setting, so that there's a North Star, that there's a fixed point, right? So that Evan became that. The other characters just kind of, as I was writing the script and I was writing the dialogue, I started to get an understanding of how I wanted all the characters to develop. And I think issue 2 does a great job of expanding on their dynamic. It's kind of like a bottle episode, like in a TV show, where they're all in their house the whole episode or the whole issue. So there's a lot of them talking to each other or avoiding each other. And so the book really explores a lot of that in the second issue. And I will expand on that more and more as time goes on. But the characters have been writing themselves. I mean, like I said, they didn't start as intended, and they just kind of evolved that way. My personal favorite character is Jack, just because he seems to be the one that just really enjoys what he's doing on a fundamental level, doesn't question anything, and so he's there for the fun, of it, the thrill of it, and it's fun to see him be somewhat naive to some of the darker, subtle things that are happening within them, and he's kind of turned a blind eye to that, and he just kind of keeps it, I guess, on a dumb fun level, I guess, is the best way to look at it. So you can always count on him for the humor and for him to have the true spirit of the Black Jackets.
And talking about maturity and even Evan, and there's that scene, and I don't want to give too much away in book 1, but there's a scene where I think it's Evan's sister is wanting to go into the void, or she thinks the void is where her parents are missing, and Evan kind of takes a very adult, sort of cold approach to the situation, and shows kind of, I guess, weighing the pros and cons like an adult would do. And I don't know exactly Evan's age per se, but that's something that I thought was very interesting because we do get those funny moments. We get those kind of interesting moments where they're hunting something down and they're saying something that could be a joke, to a priest. And if you have sort of a dark sense of humor like I do, clearly that joke was pretty funny on some levels, but then you get that real adult thing as well. And so, what is that like to really get to play both sides of that? Because we kind of see them becoming adults to some degree throughout this first issue.
Yeah. So, I like dark humor too. Obviously, I mean, I don't want to give away issue one, but there's a moment with the priest that I think was kind of set the tone for what the book was going to be like for the rest of the series, and I think I wanted the humor to come from more of their oversight or mistakes, or just sheer ignorance. Um, but also at times let that happen during the darker moments of the story, so that way the dark moments have a counterbalance, and that way you get a feeling or almost a tone that can be balanced the whole way through. So when there are the dark moments, there is something there happening, and a lot of times humorously, to offset that, so it's not too heavy and not too dark. So that's definitely the intention.
Yeah, and as this progresses, and I think an overall theme of issue one and even the entire series is that, and I was kind of mentioning it a little bit with Evan before, is that we have this conflict starting between their oath to the fraternity and this group and hunting down monsters and carrying on essentially what their parents were doing and how they're, I guess, the third generation, I want to say, or are they the fourth generation? It's one of those.
They're the third generation.
And so
or fourth generation. Sorry, they're fourth generation.
So they're the fourth generation, and so as a result, they have this oath, but at the same time, they do miss their parents. They're questioning, and everybody's having a different reaction. I forget which character, says, really, how do you sleep during this entire incident? And another character is perfectly fine or not showing any weakness per se. And so, what is that like? Because I don't think that's giving away too much of what's going on with this so far, but I think it does speak to what this series really is encompassing.
So there's the timeline, I think, of the story helps because it's only been 6 months since their parents disappeared, and they're really not sure what happened, and it's very unusual for their parents to not communicate with them at all and let them know that they're all leaving for something. So it just all happened very unexpectedly, right? So some of them are in the acceptance phase and others are not. And so some are still clinging on to the hope that they'll find their parents. And some, after 6 months of this, have accepted that, maybe they've died, maybe they're not coming back, or maybe they didn't want to be found, was another one there. So, and I think in the first issue, you see the different possibilities or really what each character may think has happened, right? So Evan, the main character, I think probably is more accepting of the fact that the parents aren't there, right? He's moved on. He knows that we need to stay focused, and despite our personal wants and desires, we have an oath, we have a responsibility to fulfill this role, and we can't let our own personal convictions get in the way of that. So, and you see how other characters are dealing with it. Jack's eating popcorn, watching TV. It has not bothered him. He's fine. He's okay with it. Asa's in her bedroom looking at her mirror because there's something's going on with her. She's very conflicted mentally right now. Ellie's very focused on finding the family. So is Lynn. Lynn can't even sleep because it's bothering her. Evan's trying to be that fixed point, that anchor for everybody. But sometimes you might question that maybe something's going on with him too. Maybe he hasn't resolved this conflict in himself, but he feels like he needs to be the leader and be that fixed point. So that and issue 2 definitely goes further into that.
And I think talking about issue 2, and not to give anything away, but something's coming. Something's coming, an incident's coming, a conflict is coming, and it's going to create a breaking point for these characters. And it's going to exacerbate what is currently existing. And if you read issue 1 and you know exactly what I'm talking about, everybody who's read issue 1, there's no way it's not going to exacerbate the problem. So what can people expect with issue 2 that's sort of in a Kickstarter phase right now?
Sure. So if you want answers that are from questions that are introduced in issue 1 and you're expecting answers in issue 2, I'm sorry. I don't give you those because I want more of your money and I want you to read more issues past issue 2. So I introduce some things and I do expand on them in issue 2. However, the intention is for you to get to know these characters a little bit better, understand their motivations more, and the threat that they experience in issue 2 is more tailored to the reputation of Black Jackets and some things that have happened in the past with Black Jackets that these kids have to answer for, even though they don't necessarily understand why. So because they're all that's left of Black Jackets, now they're in the situation where they represent, 4 generations of a lot of dirty work. And now they're experiencing, these 3 witches who were executed by Black Jackets, and they didn't die, obviously. And so they're back and they're coming after the kids because they're all that's left. So that's the threat in the second issue, are these 3 witches.
And to talk about, because I don't want to ruin anything, to talk about all this.
That's okay.
There is Kickstarter. It's got 5 days left, I believe. Your Kickstarter for issue 2. I think you can pick up issue 1 and print on a certain tier level, and then there's a bunch of rewards. So what is going on with that Kickstarter? Where can people find it? What are the rewards beyond what I just mentioned?
Yeah, so if you go to Kickstarter and you search Black Jackets, that'll be the fastest way to find it. It is a Kickstarter for issues 1 and 2. So in case you miss issue 1, you can add a certain amount of money to almost every pledge tier, and you'll pick up issue 1 with issue 2. Most of the issues just focus on the print issues, variant covers by a lot of different artists. I love the variant covers that we did for this issue. I'm really excited about them. And we did a unique tier. We did this with issue 1, and it was a huge success. We actually still have spots for issue 2, but Francesco will illustrate certain backers as Black Jackets themselves. And that was a really popular tier the last go around. He did a great job. All we did is get one picture from each backer of themselves or a loved one, and they chose the type of jacket that they wanted to be illustrated in, and Francesco drew them very accurately. It transposed how they look in this natural setting to how they would look in a Black Jackets comic, and he did a great job with it. That tier is $100. That seems steep, but if you want an artist to do a commission of you, you're probably going to be paying more than that just to get yourself illustrated. So it's actually a steal to have this done, and it's something you get to have the rest of your life. It's a cool illustration of you set in the Black Jackets universe. And the cool thing about that is, I get permission from the backers, and all the ones from issue 1 they've been fine with me placing them in further or future issues of the book. So there's a chance that if you back that tier, good chance that you might show up in some recaps or historical flashbacks, I should say, of the Black Jackets. You might find yourself in some of the panels.
It's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And I've noticed that other Kickstarters and other indie comic people are doing that as well. And that's something that is a very cool thing that I think is out there. And being drawn into a comic as well, I think is always fascinating. And I've even noticed some big companies like Zenescope do that as well as of lately. And I think that's going to become more of a common trend. And the indie comic realm started that.
Mm-hmm.
And so to talk further about the Kickstarter, so I'm very curious because Kickstarter in the last 5 years has changed dramatically, where now it's almost a pre-order form for a lot of people. And so I don't know what your Kickstarter is set up to be, how far you are done with the book. Is the book done and it's just covering the printing costs? Or is it that like 90% done and that this book is going to be in people's hands in like 2-3 months because it's complete? Like, where is that entire process for you, and how do you view Kickstarter?
So, like, when I do Kickstarters, I make sure the book is near completion, so that way I can get it into their hands quicker. So there's a little bit of a Rob Peter pay Paul situation there, where my first Kickstarter, the money that I had from that allowed me to print up the book for that specific series, but I had enough to build the first issue of Black Jackets with. So the Kickstarter for the first Black Jackets just covered printing and shipping costs and some of the rewards. That's the same thing for issue 2. Some of that money from issue 1 went right into the production of issue 2, and I wanted to make sure that it was pretty much done in time for the Kickstarter. So the book's done. Like, I just got the letters back a few days ago, and there's a couple edits we need to make, but I could send you a PDF of it right now. So we just need it printed, and we want to get it out there quickly to people. So the procedure for printing takes up to a month, sometimes more. So I have it set to where it ends in 6 days. The campaign's over in 6 days. And the rewards I'm trying to get out by the end of August or early September. I want to get this into people's hands as soon as possible.
And to talk about that, because I don't know how COVID is affecting you. I don't know how COVID is affecting a lot of people on Kickstarter. I speak to a lot of different people. And some people, Ruben Romero, Casey Bowker, those guys are somewhat pros at this stuff. But then I spoke to David Green, and he's doing his first Kickstarter, and he doesn't know how it's going to play out for him with printing and all that stuff. So what does that entire process look like for you, or do you just not know? Because let's face it, the entire world is fucked up to some degree. Everything, to put it bluntly and politely, like, and we can curse. It's the internet, everybody. We can curse.
I'll be honest with you. I held off on the campaign because it was originally going to launch in March, which is, when all this started to happen. And I followed the leader. There was a lot of other people that held off on doing their campaigns at that point in time. My initial thought was, well, maybe this is the best time to do this because a lot of other people are not running campaigns right now. So that gives this more visibility out there in the indie market, but realistically, I was hesitant to put it out there because it wouldn't be fair. If anybody that did want to get it might have been hesitant because of money situations and financial issues that they're running into. So I decided to hold off just because of that, because I thought maybe it was the right thing to do. So I launched it at a time where people were starting to get back to work, and it seemed like COVID was going away. It seemed like it. So it has affected, I think it's affected probably the amount of people that would back the book to some degree, because I'm sure there's people out there that would love to invest in Kickstarters right now that are probably hesitant to do it. I know it doesn't have the same backer count as the first issue right now. It's probably not going to finish with the same count. But I've accrued just about the same amount of money as issue 1 did, just not as many backers. So I think that's the only thing that's really been affected about it. It's just the amount of people that have been able to get behind this and get to participate in it.
So how does that make you feel? Because in many ways, that means that there are less backers who are wanting to spend more money, and that's a weird vote of confidence to some degree to look at it. Because if you're raising the same amount of money, and that gives you the same ability to produce the book, but there's less backers, but the backers that are doing it are becoming your true fans. It must be weird because in a sense it's a good thing. It means that issue one resonated with a bunch of people, but clearly we're also in a situation right now which has been unprecedented. It's weird because it's like you're losing in one category, to put it nicely, but you're winning in another. And so I don't know how you are feeling about that, because that's weird to me even just saying.
Yeah. I no, I've talked with. So it's really funny because you get to a point where you make a lot of friends in the indie comics community, right? And you all talk to each other while you're running your campaigns, and it's like everybody's trying to figure out the formula, figure out the recipe for success with crowdfunding, and there's just so many factors involved with it. I'll tell you that a lot of what's allowed the book to be successful are people that know me, friends, people that believe in me personally, in what I'm doing, or just want to support me. I think that's been a huge part of this. It is really exciting when you see people support it and you don't recognize the name. So when you see I don't know if you've messed around with Kickstarter a lot, but we get a backer report and we can see everyone's names that back the book. So it's nice to see a lot of new names for issue two that are putting more money in than a lot of the strangers with issue one. So I think, like you said, it's kind of like good and bad in a way, because you feel like if this was a concert right now, all right, there's less people I'm playing to, but they're paying a higher ticket price. Okay, so it kind of like I'm making the same amount of money, and the people that are there are care more because they're investing more money, it seems like. So it is a tough place to be in. I personally, I would love to have, this campaign reach 200 backers, but as of this, we're at 122, and that's still really good. First few campaigns I ever ran on a book, I didn't break 100. So I'm pretty grateful for the fact that I have at least that many people that genuinely want to read something that I'm doing. So I'm pleased with that. But yeah, there is a part of you that always wants to beat, your past goal or your past mark, and you always want to beat that and pass that up. But looks like this one won't do that, but I'm still pleased with the results. I'm still happy with where we're at.
And crowdfunding, because we're talking about it, and I have to ask, is become very interesting in the last year. And in many ways, it's becoming the future, because we look at people, and the big boys are coming in from DC Comics and Image, and just Todd McFarlane did $2 million, with his action figure, and Ethan Van Schrive, I think, just did $1 million with his book on Indiegogo, and Charles Soule, Ryan Brown just did Curse Words that just did 120,000 plus.
Oh, that's good.
And so and that was cool because that's an omnibus, and that's actually a really good book considering its price point. For
Yeah.
$80, it's great to get that in an omnibus. But I digress right there because I backed that, and I'm thrilled to back that. But the what I am saying though is that, how do you feel that all of a sudden all these people who are coming from DC, Marvel, Image, Dark Horse, and some of them might have been outed from the traditional realm, for lack of a better word, are now coming into crowdfunding and are bringing big money into crowdfunding? And how do you feel that that affects indie comics? Because the way I view it is that it's good and bad.
I think you're right, that it's good and bad. Um, I think that we should never expect indie comics to have some exclusive street that we vendor from. You know what I mean? Like any best kept secret doesn't stay that way, right? When something works and something's popular, um, it's really foolish to assume that any corporate entity wouldn't look at that and think, hey, there's a market for this. There's an avenue here. There's a way for us to make money through a new format, right? So I think I would probably compare that in my mind, I compare that to San Diego Comic Con, where everyone goes to it, and it's a great thing for the comic book community in general. It's a great thing for all things geek culture. The problem is everyone's there to go see the celebrities. They're not there to go see the independent creators. So everyone that's there, and they've got their table set up and their booths, it's a bunch of people that are there, and I imagine that they're walking past them because they want to get in line at Hall H to see the new Marvel film trailer, right? They want to see, the cast of the next, DC movie or Marvel film, and that it's a great thing for the overall culture, but I don't know if it does affect a lot of artists' ability to get the kind of exposure that they want and they hope for when they go to conventions.
So I'll give insight into this. Matt Hawkins said this publicly, so I can repeat it. He had to ask a cosplayer who had these gigantic wings to take about 5 steps away from his table, and he did it very politely because the wingspan of just the cosplayer, the person was walking around, the person was the nicest person in the world, but they were blocking his table. And we've seen this with even people like Dave Dorman, where Dave Dorman wrote an article and people bashed him, and a lot of comic people bashed him too. And now I think we're starting to see that, and I think it's the perfect equivalent where Dave Dorman was saying that sometimes I go to a show and I barely break even because of the celebrities and because of the cosplay. And that's not to say I don't love cosplayers. I have a lot of friends who do great work, but it's definitely an economic problem in this. And I think with Kickstarter, it's as soon as a bunch of these big people come in, it's great because technically speaking, your work on the internet now will get more traffic just by nature, but it's how many people are truly clicking on that. And so you say, "Oh, this is interesting," but I think that that's the real dilemma, and I think that it's not even so much that DC and Marvel are making money; it's more along the lines that these artists who have made names for themselves in those companies are now making money versus the actual corporation, which raises issues because some of those people haven't been paid well in general.
That's how I interpreted it, right? Because if they're going through the crowdsourcing method, it sounds like they're not getting the kind of support to create the product that they'd like to, and so that's why they're relying on the fans to help get them there. So that part, I definitely can understand it. I can see that. On the other side of that too is, yeah, you have to wonder what's the livelihood of these guys and how much are they making, and is it, you know, for me, it's a labor of love. There's no way, shape, or form that I use any money from a Kickstarter to pay for anything more than printing and shipping this stuff. I just, and so I can't imagine how many indie comics creators out there really do make even
Very
anything
few.
close to a living
Very
from this.
few. I know two. I know two. I don't know
That's two
about.
more than I know.
I know
you
two,
know?
and they got lucky. They got lucky, and they got lucky, and they have had a bunch of great Kickstarters, and it's a very hard realm and business to be in. And I know 150, so 2 out of 150 is my number right now. So
Wow.
and that's not a high percentage. That is not a high percentage. That's less than 1%. So having said all that, I'm still curious though about some other stuff involving the entire business. And COVID is on the table still. San Diego's happening, not this week, but the week after. Certain companies are having their bash this week, and some are having their bash actually after San Diego. Just FYI to everybody. But how has COVID-19 affected your trips and going out to conventions with this, if you go at all?
You know, what's funny is this was the year where I was going to go to conventions for the first time. I've never been to a convention. So it's it's so funny because I was looking forward to I was going to go to C2E2. That was going to be the first one, and that still happened. But I was able to make the trip out to Chicago because of my job. They were going to pay for a flight for me to be in Chicago for a convention that week, and so it just lined up with C2E2. So I was really excited about hanging out with all these creators that I know and everything, and we were sending each other messages, talking about things we can go do after the convention hours, go drink, go do whatever. And then I didn't go. And then my whole thought the whole time was like, well, I'll catch up with you guys on the next one, And I started looking at designing my booth and started looking at applications for conventions. I was putting all this work into it this year, and then this happened. So COVID really affected me because I think that's the one thing I'm missing is I don't have a network yet, not really, and I have not actually stood in front of my booth for 8 hours straight on my feet, waving people down, threatening to punch them if they don't stop and look at my book. And that's the experience that I was longing for, and I haven't got to have that yet. So it's been a huge bummer. Like it sucks, but there's always next year. I mean, I'm already starting to look at hazmat suits and stuff just to see if I can still make it work. But it's definitely been a bummer year for me.
And so this might not, you might not know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Clearly, I've been to a lot of conventions. I've been to about 32 of them so far in last 10 years, mostly as a fan. Very, I think I went to, and then sort of as a panelist to some degree, but still mostly as a fan. And clearly, everybody gets packed into it. There's something called con crud. I interviewed an entire anime con, their director and their panel director, several months ago at the start of the COVID virus when they canceled their con. And one of the things, you can go to a con and if somebody's sick or if people are sick, you can run through that entire convention. And so obviously as a creator, you need to shake people's hands and be in close contact with them. And so what do you think is the, I guess, game plan for cons to reopen up and to get back to doing what they're doing? Because obviously San Diego's been canceled, and I got a feeling New York Comic Con's going to be canceled, and I have a feeling that bigger cons are going to be canceled. And I'm in DC. Awesome Con is in my hometown, and that got postponed to December. But I got a feeling, depending on how everything's looking, and this is not even factored into the economy and where we're at coming out of this, if we even get out of this before January or even October. So where do you think this is all going is my overall question.
I feel like I should be asking you that question because I don't know what to expect. I so much I don't know about the convention culture because I haven't really been in and around it a lot. And I don't know what they do in situations where they have to move dates around because economically, who you're expecting to be at your convention is going to change when you change the date. They have obligations. They have, arrangements made, months in advance. So when you change the date, you've changed your convention, right? A lot of the times. So I think the virtual convention is something that a lot of them are trying, but we all know we're not getting the real experience that we want. It's not just the content of what the creators, I think we realize that conventions have gotten popular because of the overall immersion of the experience, being around it, surrounded by it. So if it gets pushed back and it gets put in a time where it's not really conducive to a lot of creators, December is, I think, a horrible month to do that in. It just seems like it to me. Just outsider looking in, that's a terrible month to do anything. So I don't know. I mean, what are you thinking about that? Because
Oh
it
man.
seems like a clusterfuck to me.
Oh man. The way I feel is that I think virtual cons are great, but I also think that a lot of these cons, and I have an issue, and I'm not going to name the con, but they wanted me to create free content for their virtual cons and for multiple of their virtual cons, and it's a problem because a lot of work goes into things as a panelist for me, and also I'm saying to myself like, what am I getting in return, and who am I really helping here? I'm not really helping anybody, and who's really going to be watching this? Because at a point, virtual cons aren't great, and then but on the flip side, the virtual con thing is that Zenoscope, and I'm a big Zenoscope guy. They've been doing a lot of virtual cons, and it's a great shopping experience because I can get all my collectibles, and I buy and I flip them, and I make money on this stuff, and now I'm getting my procurement cheaper and more effectively. And so for me, on that note, it's been great where I like going to cons to get exclusives, but at the same time, also I like getting things commissioned and graded, and that's off the table. And so that's something. And also, I like being on a con floor. I think it's cool. You know, every con I go to, I have $100 called waste money, meaning I can waste it on anything that I find shiny. And the internet doesn't have that, and I think that's part of the con experience, where I have $100 and I limit myself, and anything I want for $100, and it's built into my budget, and so it's very upsetting when I don't get that option. And it's not that I can't afford it right now. That's not the issue, even though right now, and that's the other thing as well, is that I don't know, and I'm going to throw it back to you, is that when my economic is hit, and everybody's hit economically right now, and it doesn't matter if you plan accordingly or not, the entire economy is shot. And so when I go through that, and right now I'm not looking at indie comics to buy per se. I'm saying, okay, what necessities do I need, and what books do I need to pick up that are the it books? Dark Knight Death Metal just came out. That's a book I need to have. And so if I have to choose between an indie project, and I think this is what you were speaking to about backing Kickstarter and a Kickstarter project, I hate to say it, but I'm going with the Dark Knight's Death Metal book that just came out because clearly that's something that people are going to be talking about. And so I don't know how you feel about that, going to cons and even paying for tables and all that stuff. And I just feel like there's going to be less exposure. Because I think there's going to be less of that waste money, per se, or even people's budgets are going to change dramatically. And I have a feeling that I'm a big C2C guy, and I got a feeling that this year and going into 2021, we're going to be, seeing less of that coming out.
Yeah. That's the thing that I guess I'm trying to learn more about. I've only been doing this seriously for about 2 years, 3 years. I started making comics 5 years ago. Was not really, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't really understood how the industry worked, and I still don't. So I didn't then, and I don't think I've learned much more now. But I do know that the money, and I'm the same as everyone else. You have X amount of money that you can spend and be responsible with it. You can spend that money on something that's tried and true. You know what you're going to get. You know that there's a level of quality to the product that's been proven. It's safe. There's no real risk. So your money's going to go more into that because your money's got more value right now, right? The value of a dollar to you is more now than it was 6 months ago. So investing in something that's unfamiliar, or you don't know if you have full, complete trust in the products, it's a higher risk, right? So the only way if I'm at a convention and let's say I meet somebody like you, and you decide that you'd rather drop your money on, death metal, I wouldn't talk you out of it because I'd be right there with you. I'd walk past my table and go get that too because we both know what we're getting. We know what that's going to be. So I have to sell you me versus my content. I have to build a rapport with you and build a relationship with you. If I would ever expect you to choose me over something like that, it's going to take that kind of commitment and that kind of relationship to make that work. So basically, manipulate you into spending your money with me. That's
So
kind of yeah.
so I'll add to that. When I go to a con, I go through Indie Alley, and I go through all of that. Typically, what I do is that I just take a nice stroll through it, and I look at people's banners. I look at people's things that they have. I take a quick look at who's gonna be there, and who's gonna, if any names I recognize, because there are people just in the DC area that are local indie people doing something that, since I live here, I'm going to support local first if I like what they're doing, or if I have friends who have been on this podcast, or I just know their work, or they've been good to me back. That's who I look for first, and then I'm a very visual person. So somebody has something that's really colorful, or something that's a hot girl on the banner for instance, and I'm being completely honest. And if I get flack for this, so be it. But it's true. It's
Well,
true.
it makes sense that you're a huge Zenoscope fan. You know what I mean? That's their forte, right? I mean, they're really great at marketing that. So I agree with you. That would grab your attention,
And
right?
so and so that's what gets me in, is that, and then also it's the cover art. That's the other thing as well, where
Mhm.
it's okay. I'm looking at what you got, and then okay, if I see an interesting cover, I'm saying, hey, what's your book about? I'm not an ultra horror guy. I like things that are mecha oriented. I like war comics. So I might take a chance on your book if we were at a con. And then obviously, if you come up to a con and I know you're there, I'm probably gonna pick up some stuff of yours just because you were on this podcast. But the point that I'm trying to make overall is that that's how I view it as a consumer. So if I have $30 to spend on indie, and I'm choosing to do that, and that's what I'm trying to convince people to do to some degree. I think that's one of the biggest failures of the indie comic movement, is not necessarily convincing people to buy a particular indie creator, but buy $10 at a con of any indie. Because if you convinced 400 people out of 20,000 to do that, and even if all that money went to one person, that helps everybody. I think that's the
Mhm.
biggest failure of all these indie comic groups. I really think, and this is going to be posted in all of them. And I wish they would hear this, because I think it's the biggest failure of out of all these groups, is to get people to commit to dropping $10 on something.
Yeah, it is. It's there's we're holding each other up really well. I mean, I think about the friends that I've made that are comic creators, and there's a strong camaraderie there. There's a network of people that really support each other on a very deep level. I think it goes beyond monetary. I think there's emotional support there. I know that we've all had some rough days, and we reach out to each other and really lift each other up. And I think that's been a really cool thing about the community that I've learned over time. But we do invest in each other. We do back each other. We support each other because we believe in the overall vision of there being a lot of great stories out there to tell that a lot of people don't know about. And the thing that I kind of keep reminding myself is I would have loved to have been a guy that met Robert Kirkman when he just had a small table at a booth, like, in a convention somewhere where no one knew who he was. And we all
Happy
know
to
that
make three
everybody
grand.
had some humble beginning.
He was happy to make 3 grand at a small con, and Joe Keating told that story on my podcast
Oh, yeah?
when he was working, and that thing is live, and he's just happy to make 3 grand at a small con. A lot of money to Robert Kirkman at that day. It's a lot of money right now in general, but
Yeah.
considering what he's worth, it was a lot of money, and
Yeah.
very, very humble, and it would have been great to you know, see him when he was just starting out. It would have been
Yeah.
amazing.
And know that you were there before that, and that somehow, some way, you might have helped be the person that decided that motivated him to keep going. So it's kind of the thing I think about now is, even if I don't really amount to anything, the people that I know and I've met, knowing that one of them or two of them or maybe more will be going on to be super successful one day, and I got to build a relationship with them now and talk with them now, is a pretty exciting thing. And I know that there's the reality that that's probably what's going to happen. We were all indie at one point in time. Every musician that has a major label deal played in a bar to 10 people, including their girlfriends. And they've all done it. They've all done it. Every artist out there started off with a very small appreciative audience. So I think that's the thing that's really exciting about the indie community, is that it evolves because someone ascends, right? There's always someone that ascends, I guess, is a way of thinking of it, I suppose, right? And you got to see that whole process from point A to point B. And that's the cool thing about being so involved with the indie comic community.
And there's still some artists who are extremely indie and they're making more than some of the big people on those labels because because they have only sold 20,000 copies, but they own 100% of it, and they're making more than some of these big people. And I didn't invent that. That's straight out of Bill Burr's mouth on Joe Rogan.
Oh, really? Bill Burr? Yeah, that's awesome.
That's why I'm getting my advice from everybody, clearly. But
Yeah.
but now I think we covered a lot of stuff here, and I do want to give you an opportunity to promote yourself. You got your Kickstarter that's ending in 5 days. You're pretty close to your goal. I don't know if you reached your goal yet, but you're pretty close to it. You're pretty close to it. So definitely, if you like it, support it. I'll put the link down in the comment sections below when this finishes up to that. So, but where can people find that, as well as all your social media? Twitter, Facebook page, Instagram page, if you got them. I don't know what other social media outlets there are right now, but anything you got, you can quote it.
I've been expanding on social media. I started with Facebook. I'm not sure if that was the best place to start, but I'm pretty content with starting there. So I'm just Mike Teener on Facebook. On Instagram, it's Mike Makes Comics is my handle. I have to look up my Twitter account. I obviously have not used that. Um, so those have been really my only avenues of networking right now.
And then
Um,
the Kickstarter
and
can be found where?
Kickstarter, I would just do a search for Black Jackets, and it'll be one of the first things that pops up. And it'll be a purple profile image with some black and white characters in the front. I can also send you the URL here in just a moment, so that can be something that maybe we can share, and I can tag you in a post. Um,
Yeah, I'll be
but
sharing the URL beneath the comment section for everybody who's watching this. You'll be seeing it in the comment section down below. It'll be front and center. I'll be tagging it in a few posts as well. It'll be up on my Facebook page as well for those who are looking there. I'll probably want to pinning it up to the top for a few days just to get it out there. And I got 3,800 of those people. So that's pretty much everything that's going on. So I would like to say thank you for being on because I truly appreciate doing this. Ruben Romero kind of introduced us, so he should get a thank you as well.
I think so. Yeah, thanks, Ruben, man. You've been awesome.
And then I've been saying it with everybody else and every person who comes on. Right now, COVID-19 has done a lot of damage to people. Times are tough, and I know you got a Kickstarter, and this is slightly counterintuitive to you, but the first thing that everybody should be concerned about is your own financial safety and where you're at in your life. So you should be taking care of your financial positions first. And so right now, if you can't support a Kickstarter, I don't know how you feel about this. This is how I feel. Is you should take care of your business first and your family's economic situation. Be number one uno for everybody out there. But if you have extra money and you want to support projects, That's when you can support projects. But if you don't have extra money, but you still have electricity and internet, there's no excuse not to support people on Facebook. Check out the Kickstarter. Check out their social media. I'm sure you can find Mike on Twitter very easily. Follow on Instagram. There's just no excuse anymore unless you don't have internet and electricity. And if you don't, I don't know how you're watching this. So please, if you don't have internet or electricity, tell me how you're watching this, because I would love to know how you're watching this without that, because that's the future, and I definitely want to capitalize on that. But if you have internet and electricity, definitely, and you can support economically, support social media wise, because clearly that is just as important, because it sends a message to all the algorithms, and it also sends a message to everybody else. And share, tweet at people, leave a comment, share with your friends, because you might not be able to support somebody, but your friends might be interested in it. And word of mouth is the best way how to share things and convince people to buy shit.
Yep, 100%. I agree with you on that. Same thing, I counter your sentiment more because I feel like, hey, first off, you don't need to support your family. I'm your family now, so that'll be the first thing that I put out there. So, but on jokes aside, I used to do this thing where I would equate money to things that we purchase every day. And so with this Kickstarter campaign, I've been conscious of telling people that, hey, you can back this book for $4. That's a chicken quesadilla from Taco Bell. So, pass up the quesadilla one evening and get a great book has been a selling point, I think, for me a lot. And, kind of breaking that down to everyday expenses. But, times are tough, and it's really difficult for a lot of people right now. And so, like you say, I think verbal support, or any visible support is probably a better word to use there, where you're sharing and you're talking about and letting other people know about it. You can't put a price on that. That's probably been the biggest thing, is like when I see friends of mine that share the Kickstarter that still even haven't backed the book themselves, I kind of can assume what kind of situation they're in. But the fact that they even do something like that tells me that they really do care, because no one's making them do that. I mean, I would love to physically threaten them into doing it, but I know that there's some, outcomes. I do a lot of physical threats. I've just talked about that like multiple times on this interview. But I know it to motivate someone to want to do something like that's because they genuinely want to do it, right? Because you can be any kind of asshole you want on social media. You can turn a blind eye to every single thing you see on there, or you can react. So when someone does react and they share something like that, it's a big deal. It makes me feel like $1 million. You can't put a price on it.
And I think that's a perfect place to end. So thank you for being on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, great talking to you.